Several years had passed since these events took place, before the Grand Waldorf Astoria underwent its extensive renovations. The lobby at that time was a grandiose space stretching from Park Avenue all the way to Lexington Avenue at the rear. A magnificent clock stood proudly in the center, adorned with intricate gold details and topped with the Statue of Liberty. If you were to visit now, I'm certain it would still be there, a timeless landmark to behold. It was the perfect starting point for a romantic celebration, such as a wedding anniversary. Robert Jones, a highly regarded print news editor, hustled through the bustling New York City streets amidst swirling snow flurries. He was on his way to meet his wife of 25 years, Anne. Chastising himself for falling into an old habit once again, Robert had lingered too long at work, trying to perfect a story before finally leaving too late. But he knew Anne would be there waiting for him, as she always was, punctual and organized as ever. Together, they were a formidable power couple, accomplished, respected, and fiercely independent. They were also known for their unwavering devotion to each other. In the fast-paced world of journalism, Robert was considered a gracefully aging golden boy, his charm and sharp mind making him an invaluable asset in the hectic main newsroom. Meanwhile, Anne was a force to be reckoned with in her own right, a successful marketing executive who spearheaded numerous successful campaigns in the cosmetics industry. Her glamorous presence commanded attention, and she was known for not tolerating fools, regardless of their background or beliefs. As you entered from Park Avenue, a grand and imposing flight of marble steps greeted you. The crisp scent of freshly cut flowers filled the air, emanating from a massive arrangement that graced the entryway. Beyond the flowers, one could quickly find themselves drawn to the shoe shine on the right, or perhaps enticed by the elevators and cocktail bar on the left, before being captivated by the sight of the magnificent clock in the center of the room. Robert's heart raced as he reached into his pocket. How many times had he done this same action, his hurried footsteps echoing through the grandeur of this place? His 25th wedding anniversary had coincided with Christmas, and he couldn't resist marking the occasion with an extravagant gift for his beloved wife. A long, thin box awaited her, holding a dazzling diamond necklace he had personally designed, 25 sparkling stones representing every year of their love. Saving for years in secret, Robert couldn't contain his excitement as he presented his wordsmith skills, once again with an inscription on the box, "Our love in diamonds." Why such a lavish present? Well, 25 years together is certainly a milestone worth celebrating, but Christmas held a special place for them as well. They first met at a Christmas Eve party and made it a tradition to host a Boxing Day gathering each year. As snowflakes swirled around him on this magical night, Robert couldn't help but feel overwhelmed with joy and anticipation for what was to come. Even a Salvation Army brass quartet outside Grand Central Station couldn't slow him down. He simply had to make a donation and contribute to the holiday cheer. After all, it was Christmas. The familiar twinkling lights and jolly carols of the Christmas season enveloped them, yet there were dark clouds at the edges of their life together. It felt as if they were drifting apart, like two ships lost in a vast ocean. Anne's swift climb in her company had saddled her with increased duties and a new need to travel, leaving less time for the two of them to be together. Robert, on the other hand, was overseeing a flock of young reporters, full of energy but lacking in experience, and he found himself constantly worrying about potential lawsuits. Their careers were pulling them in different directions, and Robert could feel their once solid foundation starting to crack. As they sat around the glowing fire, Anne suggested that they not put too much emphasis on the holiday season this year, and instead focus on finding things they each truly wanted to do, whether together or separately. But Robert couldn't shake off the feeling that something was amiss between them. He longed to capture Anne's undivided attention and remind her of the love they shared. He hoped that by spending quality time together, they could renew their marriage before it was too late. It wasn't that he didn't trust her. He knew Anne would never cheat on him, but lately their relationship had been strained, and he worried that they were growing accustomed to being apart. It never occurred to Robert to ask Anne how she truly felt about their current situation. In his mind, certain aspects of their relationship should be taken for granted. Isn't that what trust meant? Little did he know, Anne was also feeling the strain of their busy schedules and longed for more quality time together as well. He pushed through a thicket of vibrant flowers, the delicate petals brushing against his skin. The faint sound of a Christmas carol filled the air, and Robert couldn't help but hum along, a spring in his step. He was eager to see Anne and take her in his arms, whisking her away to the magical night he had planned for them. As he approached the bar, several men walked out, blocking his view of Anne. But then he saw her, standing by the clock with a look of anticipation on her face. Of course, she would be punctual as always, while Robert was perpetually running late. "Anne, is that you?" One of the men broke away from the group and made his way towards her, engulfing Anne in a tight hug and planting a kiss on her lips. Robert stopped in his tracks and watched from a distance. Anne seemed flustered, but not annoyed. No, now she appeared nervous. "Mike, what are you doing here?" She pulled away from him, adjusting her hair and clothes. Robert could sense the tension between them. "I'm in town for a quick meeting and then flying out to London first thing in the morning. Are you free? Is your husband?" Mike's words hung in the air, implying more than what he said aloud. Robert's heart sank as he realized there may have been more history between Anne and this man than he had previously thought. Robert's steps faltered as he slowly approached the trio, his heart sinking with each word he heard. Who was this man? What was he to Anne? The sound of their conversation became muffled as a wave of dread washed over him. Was Anne truly free to be with this stranger? The tightly wrapped gift in her hands only added to his confusion. Was it for him or for this man who seemed all too familiar to her? How surprised would she be to see him here, in such a public place? "Robert Jones," he offered his hand with forced cordiality, attempting to mask the turmoil inside. As Anne's face froze and her eyes darted between her husband and her lover, Robert's stomach twisted into knots. "I see you know my wife, Anne, and your name is..." His polite facade began to crack as he turned to face the stranger. Bill Johnson," came the stammered reply. Bill looked helplessly at Anne, unsure of how to proceed. "I see I've caught you both at a bad time. You two should catch up, and I should go. Anne, perhaps we will catch up later." Robert fidgeted nervously with his keys before accidentally pulling out the gift box instead. He could feel tears threatening to spill from his eyes as he thrust the box towards Anne, who was now fumbling with the gift in her hands. "Anne, take the car. I'll find my own way." His voice cracked as he looked down at the gleaming long, flat box with its lustrous black ribbon. He had never imagined giving it away like this. "And, for what it's worth, this is for you." With a heavy heart, he turned away and quickly made his escape. As he descended the steps outside, there was a commotion behind him. Crosswords were being exchanged between the three of them, but Robert paid no attention. He had to get away, to shield himself from the pain and betrayal he could not bear to face. How had it come to this? What had he missed by being too busy elsewhere? How could his Anne betray him so? "Robert! Robert!" Anne's voice called out to him, but he was already climbing into a waiting cab. With a quick exchange of addresses, Robert was gone, leaving behind the turmoil and heartache that had consumed their once happy home. Anne ran as fast as her legs could carry her, trying to catch up to the cab that was now pulling into traffic. It was just one taxi in a sea of them, and she knew it would be hopeless to try and find it again. Panic rose in her chest as she thought about what had just happened. Robert was never supposed to know about Bill. She had been so careful, but fate had intervened, and now everything was at risk. How could she have known that she would run into Bill? And how could he have been so thoughtless to approach her in such an open and public manner? Finally, Bill caught up to Anne, his breaths coming out in short gasps. "Anne, are you okay?" "Do you think he knows?" Anne asked, her voice trembling. "Anne, you know he knows." "Of course he knows," Bill replied with a heavy sigh. "I'm so sorry." Anne nodded, but inside she couldn't help but blame Bill for ruining everything. Why did he have to make such a scene in front of anyone who happened to be passing by? Now Robert would be devastated, and Anne would have to rearrange her entire schedule just to make time for her husband. But she was determined to fix this mess, no matter what it took. She already had a plan forming in her mind on how to smooth things over with Robert. Meanwhile, Robert sat in the back of the taxi, staring blankly out the window at the passing lights. He couldn't believe how far things had drifted between him and Anne. Was he angry? He felt like he should be, but if that were true, why wasn't he yelling or hitting something? Instead, he sat there alone, speeding away from the woman he loved while being consumed by thoughts of betrayal and regret. For the first time in his life, Robert Jones didn't know what to do. He felt lost, abandoned, and overwhelmed by a wave of emotions that he couldn't quite define. It was more than just anger. It was a deep sense of hurt and betrayal that left him feeling blindsided and alone. Despite what others may say, there is no age limit on heartache or the need to cry, and in that moment, Robert's heart was breaking as he realized the extent of the damage done to his relationship with Anne. After a long day at work, Anne returned home to an empty house. She changed into comfortable pajamas and a plush robe, the sound of her footsteps echoing through the empty rooms. Feeling restless, she dragged a chair from the living room into the foyer and settled in for the night, waiting for her husband Robert to come home. As dawn broke through the windows, Anne stirred from her light doze to find herself still alone. It was Saturday, so it wasn't unusual for Robert to be out late with friends or working on a project. But as the hours ticked by and Robert still didn't return, Anne's worry grew. He must have gotten a hotel room, she thought to herself, trying to ease her anxiety. He'll be back this afternoon. But as noon approached and then passed without any word from Robert, Anne's nerves began to fray. By 3 in the afternoon, she was in a full-blown panic. Desperate for any information, Anne called every number she could think of. Robert's cell phone, his office, the gym he frequented, even 2 bars he liked to visit with friends. She also reached out to some of his closest friends and family members, including his mother, whom she had never been particularly close with. By Sunday morning, Anne's frantic calls had turned into official reports with law enforcement agencies. An elite private investigator was on their way to the house as well. As much as she hated to admit it, Anne knew they needed all the help they could get to find Robert. Feeling helpless and desperate for any sign of her missing husband, Anne drove into the city in hopes of finding him herself. But the bustling crowds and busy streets only added to her frustration. Finally reaching her breaking point, Anne called her sister Beth for help. It was then that her family got their first glimpse at how truly dire the situation was. By Sunday dinner, Anne's entire extended family and Robert's closest friends had gathered in the dining room as a detective briefed them on the search for Robert. The tension and worry in the room were palpable as they clung to any shred of hope for his safe return. As the holidays approached, people seemed to leave town in droves. The cheerful decorations and twinkling lights did nothing to mask the heavy air of emotional trauma that lingered. But Christmas was always the worst. Anne could feel it in her bones. Despite the festivities outside, inside the detective's office, there was a sense of somberness. The room reeked of stale coffee and sweat, as if they had been sitting there for hours on end. The detective cleared his throat before delivering the news. There was no evidence of foul play or injuries, but Robert had experienced a major emotional shock. His words drew several sharp looks toward Anne, who remained silent with tears streaming down her face. But she couldn't stay silent for long. As soon as the detective left, Anne went ballistic. No, waiting and seeing was not an option. She demanded that they put down their donuts and do their fucking jobs to find her husband. Didn't they understand? Anne wanted to scream at them. She needed her husband by her side. She needed to talk with him, to explain everything. If anything happened to Robert, how would he ever understand? How could he forgive her? How could she forgive herself? The detective had said all the right things before slipping out the door, leaving Anne alone with her thoughts and fears. This mess was hers to clean up now. His departure signaled the start of the great angry argument. People threw around empty threats of knowing people who could get things done, but ultimately hid behind their cell phones as if suddenly important. Anne's brother led the chorus, chastising the police for not doing more. Her sisters sat silently, their disdain for her palpable in the air. Beth announced that Christmas Eve dinner was cancelled until Robert was found, preferring that the family give each other some space during this difficult time. In truth, everyone felt powerless and terrified by what might happen. As the hours ticked by and Robert remained missing, Anne's desperation only grew. The sense of impending tragedy hung heavy in the air, weighing down on everyone in the room. Despite their best efforts, they were all just pawns in this tragic game of fate. As the tension in the room rose, Anne fell silent. Her rage had been exhausted, and her fear was now a tangible weight on her throat. She could feel their eyes on her as Beth made her announcement, and Anne realized that she had no voice in this room. What could she say to these people who cared more for her husband than she did? They would have no ears to listen to anything she had to say. Eventually, everyone left. Anne retreated to her bedroom, feeling defeated and alone. She changed into a fresh outfit before returning to sit in front of their door, determined to wait until her husband came home. As she picked up the dress she had worn on Friday night from the bed, she noticed a gift box sitting next to it. What was the last thing Robert had said as he left? No, not the last thing. What had he said about this gift? For what it's worth, this is for you. Anne opened the box and saw a glimmering necklace inside. She held it in her trembling hands, unsure of how to feel. The next morning, she woke up where she had fainted and fell, still clutching the necklace in her hand. It was Monday. Christmas was only 3 days away, and her husband was still gone. In times like this, emergency forces in the city had dormitories where they could eat and sleep when working long shifts. The newspapermen knew where these places were, and often crashed there for a few nights when they couldn't or didn't want to go home. No questions asked. Robert made the 30-minute walk to the office, still wearing the same clothes from 3 nights ago. A quick stop at a men's clothing store fixed that. He then picked up a razor and travel-sized shave cream. No matter how bad things were, he still had a role to play. The paper would go to press. Deadlines were deadlines. He used his voicemail to screen calls, led the 9:15 story conference, met with writers until noon, and spent the afternoon working on an article discussing sea level rise. The paper operated, as all great bureaucracies do. If you didn't know exactly how to contact someone, there was no easy way to reach them at all. If Anne had tried to reach him, she hadn't succeeded. But maybe it was for the best. What was there to say anyways? Anne was feeling completely useless in this situation, unable to contribute any helpful ideas or solutions. She knew her personal assistant wanted to send her home, but she couldn't leave when so much was at stake. So she put all of her employees on the task of scouring every possible place where someone could hide out, from Boston to DC. She didn't care if senior management disapproved. Finding the missing person was her priority. In the midst of the chaos, Anne even suggested looking under bridges for any clues or signs of their whereabouts. Finally, one of her team members, Holly, found a breakthrough. Her father worked for the New York Press Department and had access to hidden places that could potentially be used as hiding spots. With Holly's help, Anne had a list of addresses and phone numbers within 20 minutes. In a matter of 2 more minutes, Anne had contacted all of the dorms and confirmed an address. Without hesitation, she hailed a cab and rushed off to find the missing person. As the days passed, Robert found his spirits lifting slowly. The desk sergeant had been kind and accommodating, offering him a place to stay for as long as he needed. Work was also going well, providing a welcome distraction from the turmoil in his personal life. On this beautiful, cold morning, Robert looked forward to his usual walk before work. However, his plans were interrupted by the sight of Anne standing in his path, not 50 feet away. "Robert, I've been looking for you everywhere," she exclaimed breathlessly. "And you found me," Robert replied calmly, though he felt detached from the situation. It was as if he was watching himself speak rather than actively participating in the conversation. He couldn't shake the feeling that he should be more emotional or upset about what was happening. Anne's face came into sharp focus as Robert listened to her explanation, but despite being acutely aware of her presence, he couldn't help but feel numb inside. It was like he was saying goodbye, though he wasn't sure what exactly he was bidding farewell to. "Please, Robert, let me explain," Anne pleaded. "I didn't want to hurt you. I never wanted you to find out like this." "Of course, Anne," Robert responded coolly, "but really, what is there left to say? That you've been having affairs with other men. I know that now. That you hid it from me. I know that too. And that I caught you only by chance. Well, I was there. I don't need to hear any grimy details or your feeble protests that it meant nothing more than sex. What else is there to say?" Feeling Robert slipping further away from her, Anne took a few tentative steps towards him, hoping to bridge the emotional distance between them with physical closeness. "Can we please go somewhere private and talk things through?" she implored. "Anne, I found out about your infidelity in a hotel lobby. It doesn't get much more public than that," Robert retorted sharply. "If you have something to say, then say it now." His words stopped her in her tracks, and Anne realized she wouldn't be able to smooth things over and make everything seem normal again. "All right, Robert, let's talk," she said, her voice quivering with emotion. "I love you so much. I always have. But I started feeling restless. I didn't know what was wrong or how to tell you because I couldn't even understand it myself. When I got the promotion and started traveling more, I found myself surrounded by different men who paid attention to me. Some of them flirted with me, and for the first time in a long time, I felt desired as a woman. It was an exhilarating feeling, one that I desperately needed but couldn't ask you for. How could I? After all these years together, it wouldn't have been fair." "Anne, you could have told me any of this at any time," Robert responded calmly. "That my beautiful wife gets compliments from other men. Do you think I'm so foolish as to be surprised or jealous? But there's more to it, isn't there? No need for details, just a simple yes or no." Anne hesitated and looked down, unable to meet her husband's gaze. "Yes," she finally admitted. "And there we have it," Robert stated solemnly. "I don't know how or why we ended up here. I can't pinpoint where exactly I went wrong and lost you so completely, but clearly I did." As he uttered those final words, Robert felt like he was saying goodbye, not just to his marriage, but also to a significant part of himself that he couldn't quite put his finger on. Had he made the conscious decision to leave Anne to her lover at the hotel? Or was that just his subconscious speaking on his behalf? He couldn't say for sure. All he knew was that the words had escaped his mouth without his full consent, as if someone else was pulling the strings of his mind and body. Robert watched as he walked past his wife, unable to believe what he had just done. Anne stood in shock, trying to make sense of what her husband had said and the actions that followed. It was just a physical attraction, a fleeting moment of excitement. She tried to explain this to him, to make him understand that she only loved him, but he didn't see it. He didn't believe her. Lost in thought and distracted by her own inner turmoil, native New Yorker Anne found herself turned around in the city blocks of Midtown Manhattan. The streets were short running north and south, but long going east and west. She searched for familiar landmarks to get her back on track, but her mind kept wandering back to Robert's anger and sadness. Did he really mean all those hurtful things? Finally finding a seat in a nearby coffee shop, Anne reflected on the source of Robert's pain and resentment. He didn't want details about her affair or how many men there were. All he wanted was for her to be honest with him, to trust him enough to talk about her desires and changes in feelings. But instead, she chose to hide it and betray him. She feared his rejection if she were to tell him the truth, but in doing so, she ultimately destroyed their relationship. As the realization hit her like a sharp pain, Anne couldn't help but feel like a fool. She broke Robert's heart because she didn't trust him enough to listen and understand. She never gave him a chance to fight for their love or find ways to make things work. And now, she couldn't expect him to believe her when she never trusted him before. In the end, Anne's affair was driven by fear and a lack of true love for Robert. She wasn't courageous enough to be honest with him and accept the consequences of her actions. Instead, she betrayed his trust and chose temporary pleasure over their marriage, and now she must face the consequences of her choices. The lies we tell ourselves can eat away at us, but the truth, when it's revealed too late and for the wrong reasons, can be even more devastating. Anne's conversation with Robert had been a mistake, and now she was left to deal with the aftermath. She reached for the phone, but then changed her mind and set it back down. There was nothing she could say to fix things. She had destroyed everything between them. As Christmas approached, Beth finally relented and invited the family to gather on Christmas Eve for a traditional feast and gift exchange. Anne received an invitation as well, but she knew better than to attend. No one wanted her there. Weeks later, in the middle of a conference call, Anne's personal assistant informed her of an urgent call that she needed to take. It was an emergency involving Robert, who was currently being observed at Bellevue after attempting suicide. He hadn't shown up for work for 2 days, and police were called when he was found with a loaded gun and a note. They listed Anne as his emergency contact. Anne quickly sprang into action with a plan. Someone would get the elevator ready, another person would gracefully end her call, someone else would grab her coat and purse, and another person would hail a cab. By the time she arrived at Bellevue, she was back in control and demanding to see her husband and his doctors immediately. Her efficiency masked her true emotions as she braced herself for what awaited her at Robert's hospital room. 2 doctors, both with credentials in psychiatry, sat at the table. One was the renowned author of a respected textbook, while the other was heading a national study on depression and suicide in middle-aged men. Your husband is suffering from severe illness. He has been diagnosed with clinical depression, has made plans to end his life, and has taken steps to obtain a gun. He poses a serious threat not only to himself, but potentially to others as well. We have discontinued his medication in hopes that he can regain control of his thoughts. Unfortunately, whatever triggered this state remains unknown to us. We were hoping you could provide some insight. Anne fabricated a story, though she couldn't recall the exact words she had said. The doctors took meticulous notes and spoke amongst themselves as if it were progress. But it wasn't helping Robert. She needed to talk to him. "I want to see my husband. When can I see him?" "We can arrange for you to see your husband, but it will have to be through a two-way mirror. For now, we cannot risk any potential triggers that may worsen Robert's condition. Sadly, that includes seeing loved ones." Was that a fading bruise on Robert's face? He hadn't shaved or groomed himself in weeks. Was his hair even cut since the last time she saw him? Had he bathed at all? The hospital gown revealed his frail legs, making him look aged and pitifully alone. In slow motion, Robert struggled against his wrist restraints, shaking his head back and forth. He was mouthing something, but Anne couldn't hear what it was. What was he doing with his fingers? She stepped closer to the glass, and the attending doctor didn't stop her. Robert was pointing at something. At the ceiling? The walls? Did Robert catch a glimpse of her? He seemed to stir and shout louder. Was he shouting her name? Anne was certain that he was calling out to her. Did Robert pretend to hold a gun with his hand and fingers, aiming it at his head? Was he still trying to take his own life? Without uttering a word, Anne left the room. It finally dawned on her what she had done and what she needed to do. Visiting hours ended at 8 p.m. and at 7:30, a van pulled up with a woman and her daughter coming to see their father. They went through a quick security check, but as the guard was distracted, the mother passed her purse to her daughter without anyone noticing. Just before closing time, the daughter left, leaving the mother free to make her way upstairs. Psych wards are designed to keep patients inside, but less so to keep people out. To appear as if she belonged there, Anne hung up her raincoat on a rack and made sure her white lab coat was visible. Carrying a clipboard and sample tray, Anne was granted access to the floor and easily used a swipe card to enter the ward and go straight to Robert's room. Anne couldn't tell how long she had been sitting there, her eyes fixed on the pale, still form of her husband. It felt like an eternity had passed. Slowly, as the effects of his medications wore off, Robert's consciousness returned. Anne must have dozed off, because when she looked again, he was lucid and staring at her with piercing blue eyes. "Why are you here?" The question hung heavy in the air between them. Anne took a deep breath before responding. "You asked me to come. I'm your wife." Robert looked away, his expression pained and distant. "Robert, you told me what you wanted. You told me what to do." From the corner of his eye, he watched her take a small pistol from her pocket. "I know you want to die. Because of what I did, you want to die, and so do I." Anne's voice trembled as she spoke. "We had a good life together once. Let's end it the same way. I'll go first, then you, and maybe we'll see each other on the other side." Robert looked at his wife, and for a moment everything else seemed to fall away. He could see her as the girl he married, as part of every good thing that ever happened to him. She had her plan, but he had his own plan too. To Anne, it was as if Robert was looking at her for the first time since their love had been tainted by tragedy. "Give me the gun," he said quietly. "Check the corridor." As Anne handed over the weapon and moved to peer through the doorway, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were both standing on the edge of something unknown and terrifying, but they were in it together until the very end. Anne passed the pistol to her husband's lap, almost throwing it. What would happen if she ended her own life? Could she actually go through with it? Running away felt like the only option for Anne, a refugee from her own life. She hoped that there was something after death so they could be reunited. If not, at least they would share the same fate. There was a sense of dignity in making this decision together with her husband, one last act of love. "We have 5 minutes until the next patrol. Keep watch." Anne's duty was to watch, to make sure they were not caught. She owed it to her husband to give him this final act and then join him in death. Her throat felt tight, but she had made up her mind. This was the only way to fix all the pain and suffering she had caused. She closed her eyes and whispered a prayer, hoping that they would be together forever. "Anne, enough time has passed. Let's do this. Sit on the bed first." Taking a deep breath, Anne sat on the edge of the bed, ready to face their fate together. It had been a while since she was this close to Robert. Since that night, the thought made her uneasy, but it also made sense. The gun would fall within Robert's reach. As she held the gun in her hand, Anne expected it to be cold, but it wasn't. She knew she couldn't hesitate. She needed to put the barrel against her temple and pull the trigger. But nothing happened. She tried again and again, but still nothing. This was all going wrong. She wanted to set Robert free and be with him, but the gun was not cooperating. She looked up at her husband, tears in her eyes, feeling like a failure as a wife. It was a risky move for Robert to leave that night. He knew that Anne would stop at nothing to find him, using all of her resources and connections to track him down. She would tell herself she was just trying to find her husband, but really she wanted to control him, and if she found him, she would use affection and guilt to manipulate him back into their old life together. But Robert could never surrender to this cycle again. In the end, it all came down to life or death, for their marriage at least. Would they stay together or go their separate ways? Robert couldn't say for certain. Sometimes he wondered if he should just give up and let Anne pick up the pieces, but he didn't want to indulge in self-pity. Robert couldn't help but wonder what Anne would do if she discovered that her husband was contemplating suicide. It was a scenario she never would have expected, leaving her completely unprepared and without a plan or strategy to sway him in any way. She would be stripped of her usual tools and tricks, left to face the harsh truth. It was possible for Anne to walk into the room and shoot both herself and her husband. Or maybe she would apologize profusely before turning the gun on herself. There were so many things that could go wrong. Robert knew he had successfully lured Anne into this situation when she showed him the gun. He easily took it from her and removed the bullets, rendering it harmless, but all of this drama meant nothing if Anne didn't follow through with their plan. Despite his doubts, Robert didn't think Anne would actually go through with it. She might put the gun to her head, but she wouldn't pull the trigger. To his surprise, Anne did just that. How could she? In that moment, Robert saw his wife in a whole new light, strong, fearless, and determined. He smiled at her, and Anne looked back at him with confusion. But then he revealed the empty gun and held out his hand to her. Anne took his hand and pulled him close, holding on to him tightly for a long time. "Let's go home, my dear wife," Robert said, and they did eventually. They faced some challenges along the way, legal battles, and convincing medical professionals of their stability, but they made it through together. In the end, who was to blame? Did it even matter? Who deserved more punishment? None of that mattered anymore. Life is short, love is precious, and when you find true love, you hold on to it fiercely and never let go. Even if things get tough, you fight until the very end. Wishing everyone a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.